Yes, it's all going to be posted online. Wait till I see the guy. All right, are we ready? 1 second. Great, thank you. So you guys are here for interviewing strategies and techniques. Great, just to introduce ourselves, we are Career Services. This is Brooke Rodsatter, and I'm Candace House. And we're going to talk about a couple things that will help you get ready for your interviews if you are already in the interview phase. This is the time of year where the companies are recruiting, and just this will help you kind of prepare for that whole process. So today we're going to talk about mastering the interview, focusing on 3 areas: how to prepare, focus, and address the questions that are going to be asked to you by a potential interviewer. We're also going to dissect the behavioral interview, which is one type of interview that is utilized by a good number of our companies, as well as the technical interview, which is unique to engineering students or anybody who's doing work in the technical field. We're also going to talk to you about some of the interview tips, both verbal and nonverbal communication tips, as well as the type of questions you should ask when you are working with an employer during an interview. You are not only being interviewed for a position, but you're also interviewing the company on your own to see if they're a fit for what you would like to do. So your turn at questions, what should you do during that process? And finally, follow-up. What should happen after the interview? It is a process, so there are some steps that you should follow when you leave that interview room. So for mastering the interview, first thing you want to do is you want to prepare. You want to prepare before you go into an interview with a company. You want to start thinking of how you're going to provide evidence of skills and experience and capabilities that separate you from other candidates. So you have the luxury of being in a classroom setting with students every day. You guys are working on projects, you're part of student organizations. You need to start thinking about, how did you participate in student projects? What did you take from a student organization? Or what experience have you gleaned, or something personally that you glean from an experience that you can try to cultivate during an interview. So you want to start thinking about personally what makes you different from some of the other candidates or the peers that will be interviewing for the same positions. So be prepared to provide your ability to work in teams and the way you meet commitments. How are you able to complete a deadline? How have you demonstrated this in a team environment? Your experience with conflict resolution. This is something most students will be asked in a behavioral interview, and I'll give you some examples. But how do you deal with conflict? How would you resolve certain situations? If someone gives you a problem scenario, what would you do from there? How are your communication and interpersonal skills? Very important. Not only are you demonstrating your communication skills during an interview, but they will ask you about your communication skills. Have you had to do a presentation before? Tell me a time you've had to work with a faculty member one-on-one. How did you communicate with that faculty member? So start thinking about these communication skills. And as an engineering major, they're looking for students more and more with these communication skills because they're looking for project managers. They're looking for people who work in teams and who could lead a team. Your work ethic. You want to make sure you have a strong work ethic and you're prepared to give examples of how you've demonstrated that work ethic in the past. Your decision-making skills and your ability to set priorities. Have you had to multitask before? Are you a student involved in many activities? How do you set your priorities? Those are the type of things you need to start thinking about before you get into an interview. How do you articulate that to someone? Integrity. How do you demonstrate or prove your integrity? As well as practical experience that you may have. So these are just questions that you need to ask yourself and be prepared to prove when you're actually in an interview setting. These are the areas that they're looking for. These are like their check marks. They want to make sure you can work in teams, that you have a strong work ethic, that you're responsible, that you have experience, and that you can communicate. So think about these areas because that's what the employer is thinking about. Prior to your interview, there are some tips that something you should go through. First off, review your resume. Your resume is the document that they are working from. Your resume is how they know you thus far. So everything on that resume is a talking point. And a lot of times employers will read your resume and have questions written out based on what you've listed on your resume. So make sure you review your resume. You may have created it 3 months ago. You've been posting it on Interview Track. You haven't read it in a while. You go into the interview. They'll ask you about a project that you've worked on, or maybe they'll ask you about your experience in C++, and you forgot about that project. It was so long ago. Or maybe you forgot what you did in C++, but you did it a couple semesters ago. You want to make sure you review your resume, and everything on that resume is a talking point. Practice reading your resume, going through projects, work experiences, any of the programming languages, or any skills that you have, and be able to give examples or explain that situation. Everything is a talking point, so know your resume, because that's what they're basing a lot of their questions from. You also want to practice discussing topics that relate to business success. For example, think about your past projects and how you can transfer that or equate that to success. For those of you who have gone to our resume workshops or even our leadership workshop on transferable skills, we talk about something called a transferable skills. And those are skills that you have, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in a work-study position, that can transfer to success in the business world, that can transfer to success to a company. So you want to think about those past projects, student organizations, membership in professional societies, work experiences, and that's outside of just co-op and intern, experiences that you have on campus or research opportunities. You want to make sure that you practice discussing these areas because they'll ask you questions about it. Tell me a little bit more about when you worked at the USC bookstore on Saturdays during football season. And if you're like, well, I just kind of folded T-shirts. They want a little bit more. You could say it was a high-stress environment. We are one of the top football teams in the nation, so that is the busiest day. You're thinking about customer service. You're constantly taking inventory, and you need to be able to do it with a smile on your face and think about your whole team. So here you're answering something a lot more effectively and providing examples of teamwork, organization, multitasking, communication, and customer service instead of saying, yeah, I folded T-shirts that Saturday. It was really busy. So you want to start thinking about how are you going to equate some of these experiences and practice. Talk to yourself in the car on the drive over to the interview, walking down Tudor Hall before you get into the interview room. Just kind of practice discussing these scenarios. Participation in conferences, open houses, or any out-of-class experiences, you want to also practice discussing about. If it's not on your resume, think about it. Maybe it should be on your resume, and if it didn't make the one-page cut, maybe you might want to work that into a discussion. Oh, I also had experience with this conference recently. Went to the IEEE conference. It was great. We were able to learn about X, Y, and Z. You're bringing these experiences to the interview. They're learning more about you, so remember that. You want to prepare leadership examples and team activities. We cannot stress how often companies are looking for team and group. It's one of the reasons why here at the university there are so many team and group projects that you work on. It's because you're doing it in industry. So think about those examples of where you had to take a lead or where you had to take initiative and how you can bring that out during an interview. You also want to organize your success. Think about areas where you succeed. This could be academically. Maybe you've been on the dean's list, and because of that, you have one of the strongest GPAs in the School of Engineering. You want that to come across. That might just be one line on your resume, but you want to articulate that during your interview because that's something that's very important. Any related experience. If you've read their job description and they're working in an area or working in a field that you have experience in, you want to make sure they know that. So let that success come across during the interview. Finally, any technical interests that pertain to the position. If you are on a design team, anything like that, you want that to come across in the interview. You want to make sure that they have this wide breadth of what you can do, whether it's a success, personal success that you've had, leadership experiences, or any topics that relate to business success from your resume. The next area of mastering the interview is focus. You want to stay focused during the interview process. It's nerve-wracking, you know it. We've all been through the interview process. You guys have probably gone through an interview or two or a mock interview. You want to make sure that you're focusing, that you're answering the questions that are at hand, and that you are focused on the job objective. That if they mentioned, if you're trying to do a research position where you're working by yourself and they're not team-driven, then maybe you want to ease up on how many team examples you have, and maybe you want to say, you know, I'm driven to work well by myself. Think about the job. Think about what they are looking for and how you can articulate that and relate that to the background and your background and the actual job opening. So some of the questions that you might want to think about: what do you like most and what do you do best, and how can that pertain to that particular position? What gives you personal satisfaction? What do you like to do? And this is helping you focus on positions that are a good fit for you. Address. You want to make sure you're answering the questions and that you understand what the interviewer is looking for. If you're ever confused during an interview, and if you're not sure, if you don't understand a question, it's okay to ask. Or you can answer a question. You could say, did I answer your question effectively, or did you want me to elaborate? It's okay. You want to make sure that you're addressing what they're looking for. And the interviewers will ask you questions like, what do you want to do? And at this point, sometimes you're going to start thinking, what do they want me to want to do? No, answer the question. What do you want to do? What are you looking for? This is part of the interview process. And one thing that I always like to mention, I know people are stressed out and they're trying to find the position. You want to make sure you're finding something that's a fit for you. So you don't want to trick yourself into a position and find yourself working independently if you really like teams, or working in a research position if you really don't like researching, or maybe you're a computer science student that's not married to the idea of programming all the time. Maybe you want to do something more, or maybe you don't like programming and you're a computer science major that doesn't like programming, but you want to take that skill set and do something else. Think about that, because that could come across in an interview. And there are a lot of times, and I've heard it with a lot of students, I'm sure Brooke has, where a student will interview for one position and the employer will be so impressed and say, you know what, you're not really a fit for this position, but I know something else that might work for you. Let's connect, or here's another person that I'd like for you to meet with. I think you would be really good for product development instead of programming. That happens. So you might find a fit somewhere else. You also want to make sure you, again, think about your background and communication and teamwork. And if those things are your strengths, the interviewer wants to know that. So again, remember to start thinking about your strengths and bringing everything out. All right. So the two types of interviews, there are behavioral and technical interviews. So how many of you have done a behavioral interview? Okay, that is like the standard interview. All non-engineering interviews are pretty much behavioral. That is an interview where they want to know, how would you behave if you were in a certain situation, or how have you behaved in past situations? And those are the questions that you're like, why are you going to ask me this? I hate having to give situational examples. But this is, again, so they get a better idea of how you would react and work in certain situations. So you're asked to give specific examples of when you demonstrated a particular behavior or a skill. You're going to describe in detail either in an event, a project, or an experience that you've had. How did you deal with the situation, and what was the outcome? Brooke's going to actually give you a tip on how you can prepare for this. There's a really helpful tip. But this is what a behavioral question or a behavioral interview would focus on. Have you ever been in a bad group? Or were you ever in a situation, not a bad group, but they're like, yes. No. Have you ever been in a situation where someone in your team did not pull their weight? What did you do? And what was the outcome? Those are very typical, common behavioral questions. Some other examples. Describe a time when you were faced with problems or stresses at work that tested your coping skills. What did you do? Now, there are some students who maybe haven't had formal work experience. And you're like, I've never had formal work experience, so I've never been in that situation. Bad answer. You want to give them an answer. So you want to say, I haven't had any formal work experience, but I have worked in teams. I've had some problems and stresses as a student. And at one point I was working on a project, and then you're answering the question. So if you don't have formal work experience, try to work it into how can you answer the question. I had this experience in the classroom, or I had this experience in my on-campus job. So you want to make sure that you're answering a question and giving them some type of idea of how you would behave in that situation or a similar situation. Give an example of a time when you had to be relatively quick in coming to a decision. You can make a joke and say, right now. But again, your interviewer might not have a sense of humor, so watch the jokes. But think about that. Think about an example and take time. You don't have to rush into the answer. Take a moment to think about the question. That's fine. You don't have to shoot back an answer. Just think about some examples that would highlight your skills and would answer the question. Answer the question, and then if you feel that you might not have answered the question, you might want to ask, is that did that answer your question effectively, or did you want me to elaborate? So again, it's okay to ask them questions, and it's okay to pause. You can pause after the question. You don't have to. I think people get scared of the silence in an interview. You hear the clock. That's okay. Take 30 seconds and then answer the question. That's fine. Give me an example of an important goal you have to set, and tell me about your progress in reaching that goal. So talk about the goal. Talk about how you managed the goal. Did you write down a list of what you needed to do? Did you maybe take a project management approach to what you had to do? Did you set up meetings with people to reach your goal? Did you collaborate with others to reach your goal? Did you seek advice? All of those skills are great. Collaboration, planning, follow-up, if you're following up with other people to reach a goal. And then you want to reach the goal. You want to let them know. And I successfully finished my certificate program in SAP, and I'm able to utilize that during my job search process. So think about, what did you do to deal with the situation, some details that you could give, and finally what the outcome should be. So that's what you should focus on for behavioral. And now Brooke is going to talk a little bit more about the STAR method, which will help you during a behavioral interview.
Okay, so that was awesome. Good advice. And this really quickly is, this might help you organize your thoughts a little bit. I know behavioral questions, there are a long list of different types of questions. So although you prepare for an interview, you might get into a situation where they ask you a question and you go, oh my gosh, I didn't prepare for that. What am I going to do? Remember the STAR method. The STAR method will help you organize your thoughts in the interview process. It's very, it can be a very time full of pressure. So if you just remember STAR, describe the situation that you were in. And, describe the situation, describe what different challenges maybe were at hand. And then task. Your task is kind of explain what would go into fixing the problem or creating an outcome. So that's your next step. So you might explain the situation and still not know what you're going to say for the T part, but at least you're kind of organizing it as you go. And then A is emphasize the action that you took. This is a great way for you to remember, okay, this is where I want to bring out the skills, the action that I took, the difference that I made in a group project or a goal that I was trying to reach, and show how you influenced it and bring out some skills that may transfer to this position. So, and then finally you want to show results and outcome success. So hopefully it's a success. You wrap it up with how it was a successful outcome or how you accomplished something. And I'm going to give you a little personal example. I'm not an engineer, but I think that this example could apply to anyone. So to answer, give me an example of an important goal you had to set and tell me about your progress in reaching that goal. Now, all of you are students. All of you probably have, lots going on. So you could combine all of your experiences into one big goal, or you could focus on something more specific in a project, a smaller goal even. So my example was to complete my USC graduate school with a high GPA and gain work experience in the field of higher education administration. This was a goal I had that I could use in the interview process when I was looking for a full-time position, which I'm in now. So what did I do? What was my task at hand? Well, I needed to focus on networking in the field and landing work experience, and while also studying to gain knowledge and maintain a high GPA. So what I'm trying to get at is that shows some skills already, some values already in answering the question. The action that I took was that I learned to balance and prioritize responsibility as well as manage time when juggling 3 classes and 2 graduate assistantships. You can talk about anything here, whatever skill you want to bring out. Maybe you had to be persistent and follow through to get your dream internship, and what did you do to get that dream internship? And then what was the result and outcome of getting that dream internship, and that's what you focus on next. And for me, it was I improved my time management skills, completed deadlines on time, and achieved my original goal of graduating with a high GPA, satisfactory GPA. I don't know if it was high, but you wouldn't say that in an interview. And I gained knowledge in my field and in the workplace. And you can even go more into I didn't want to go into a lot of detail because that might bore you, but go into detail about what knowledge you gained, what other successes. I mean, you can really be creative in this process and bring out a lot of skills and impress the interviewers. So it's okay, again, like Candace said, if you don't have a scripted answer. They don't want scripted answers. When you're in the room, you want to be able to bring out skills, and this is a great method to use to kind of organize it so that you can kind of wow the interviewer and not, what did they say, ow the interviewer? I heard that yesterday. So they're not like, ooh, where were they going with that? And practice it. Practice it on a few questions that you find online or something that are behavioral questions, and kind of get used to answering questions in that format. And I think you'll find it helps a lot. Next, which I'm sure you're very curious about, a technical interview.
Thank you. The STAR method, again, will help you organize, like Brooke said. And you can think you're ready, but when you're in that room, and I'm sure you guys have been in that room with the person, and you have your high GPA, and it, just think STAR. And remember Brooke, because it will help you a lot. Okay, so technical interviews. Most of the time, and there's no script as to which company has what interview. I've met with a lot of you guys one-on-one, and I have some insight into what companies focus on what interview, but for the most part, you'll have both. If you get to a second round and you were behavioral the first time, you'll probably have a technical interview the second time, or some companies weed you out with technical that first time. Second interview, they want to see if your personality is a fit for the corporate culture. So there's no one interview comes first. Some companies never even touch the behavioral. Some companies never do a technical interview. They're just going off of the resume, and they know if you're finishing with aerospace from USC, then you know enough for me. Depends on the company, but be prepared for both possible scenarios, behavioral and technical. So the technical interview will consist of true technical questions in your field. So if you are a computer science student and you've listed that you have extensive knowledge in C++, or if you're a biomedical engineer and you listed some lab equipment that you've used to conduct some research, you want to make sure that you're able to discuss this with someone and articulate your experiences. And they will ask you questions, and sometimes they'll be very detailed questions where it's, yes, I have experience in this and I worked in this module. Sometimes it's very open and say, tell me about what you've built in HTML. And you're like, okay, I've done some websites. They want more. So some companies are very leading and some are very open. You have to watch some of the open technical questions so that you're guiding yourself to have a very concise answer, but you're providing them with appropriate details as to your technical expertise. And so the technical will, of course, vary based on your majors. So you want to make sure that you know everything you've listed on your resume. Sometimes they'll ask, okay, how would you go about doing this in AutoCAD? You want to make sure that you're refreshed enough to know the steps for you to do something in AutoCAD or SolidWorks, or if you listed MATLAB as something that you have a lot of experience in. You want to make sure that you're able to dialogue or articulate that with someone. If you don't know something, it's okay to say you don't know. But you don't want to just say, no, I don't have experience in that. You could say, no, I don't know, but I'm a quick learner. I would love to find out more about that area, that process, or that particular program. Or maybe you might want to equate experience that you've had in something similar. For example, are there any ISE students in here? Okay. Well, there's a lot of systems that will use ISE-wise where, for example, enterprise resource planning. Leader is SAP, but there's also PeopleSoft and Oracle. And sometimes a company will use PeopleSoft, and they'll say, our Oracle. Do you have experience in Oracle? Instead of saying, no, I do not have experience in Oracle, you could say, I haven't had the chance to work in Oracle, but I have extensive knowledge in SAP. And I know that there are some parallels, and if I had the opportunity, I would love to see how they're connected and how I could use my SAP skills in Oracle. You could do the same thing with a programming language. Maybe you know something out. Maybe you know one object-oriented program and not the other. You want to let them know what you know and how you're a quick learner and you're willing to learn the new technical areas. So don't freak out if you don't know something. Try to think of something similar that you do have experience in. I jumped off topic a moment, but in case you don't know something technically, think of something you do know that could complement what they're asking. Technical questions, of course, can be in your field, but it can also consist of brain teasers and riddles. Have any of you had the brain teaser or riddle type of example? They're fun. They throw you off for a moment, but they want to see one thing. They want to see your problem solving, your analytical skills. For example, some technical examples of those type of questions. How would you improve this pen? They might hold up a pen. How would you improve the design of this pen? Now, the pen is working fine. You might want to start thinking about, oh, okay, how can I make it a little bit more effective? They want to just see your logic. How would you explain a situation? There's no wrong or right answer. Another question that they'll ask is, why are manhole covers round? Just brain teasers, those type of things. And, you could say, well, it's a shape that doesn't collapse on itself, so maybe I could think of another shape that you could use it as an example. So these are they're considered technical questions, but they don't really care about the manhole. They don't care about you making the pin, changing the pin. They don't think anything's wrong with the pin, but they want to see that engineering logic. How would you change this pin? How would you make it more efficient and effective? What kind of questions do you ask yourself when you're presented with something to change or something to improve? What is your process? Those type of logical and analytical questions are also part of the technical interview. And of course, you're going to prepare for your field. Make sure you know everything that's on your resume. Make sure you're able to provide examples of what you've done in the classroom. But you also want to make sure that you're able to logically answer questions like, why is a manhole cover round? How would you improve this pin? What do you think about this room? If you're a civil engineer, sometimes they use the room around you and ask you to improve on a structure. If you wanted to change that corner, what are some of the steps that you might want to do? And they're going to ask you questions based on your field and how do you think on your feet? How do you work with those type of situations? So practice it. And it will change from field to field. Okay, some tips, general interview tips. You want to make sure that you make a good first impression. So start with a firm handshake, very important. The interview begins when you first make contact with that person. You want to maintain eye contact. You want to seem very confident. So always maintain eye contact with who you're interviewing. Don't look down. Don't look up in the corner because you're searching for the answers out there somewhere. Maintain eye contact. It's very important. You also want to make sure that you are presentable. Your physical attire is a part of the interview as well. So wear your business suit. Even if you're meeting with a company that you know they wear jeans every day because your friend works there and nobody ever wears a business suit there, it shows respect by wearing your business suit on the first interview. If you meet with them for a second or third time and they tell you, listen, at Apple we actually never wear a suit, so come business casual, then come business casual that second interview. But that very first time, show respect and wear a business suit. If you have any exposed body piercings or tattoos, you might want to cover them up. Take that earring out for the day. If you have tattoos, usually you have a long sleeve shirt, but just try to make sure that you're very presentable. Try to, no matter what you've heard about the company, the first interview, you should present yourself in a very conservative manner. And then afterwards, once you find out more about the culture and maybe they tell you to dress down a bit, you can. You also want to make sure you focus on both verbal and nonverbal communication skills. So clearly articulate your answers. I am a native Southern Californian, which means I speak very fast. And I will go, 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 go. So if I were in an interview situation, I have to remember to slow down. If you have an accent, slow down. Clearly articulate your answers so they can understand you. And if you feel that you're exaggerating your words, that's fine. Just make sure you take your time. They understand what you're saying. Speak up, very important. A lot of times you're nervous and you might mumble an answer because you don't feel confident about it. Project your voice. It's, again, they are thinking of you as a potential candidate to be in their office setting. And if people in the work environment can't hear you, it might annoy them. So speak up, make eye contact. The second bullet is actually something that I've heard from a lot of our recruiters, some big companies. We're taping, so I don't think I should say their names. But and I don't know if this is just because it's a student idea. And one thing they always mention is USC students are so great, so smart. Every once in a while, though, the candidates are so self-deprecating. They don't realize their worth. So they are asked a question, maybe you're asked a question, and you're like, I don't have experience in that, or we never went over that in class. And it stops right there. Now, it seems to you right now, why would you do that? That's bad. It happens all the time, and a lot of our recruiters let us know. Tell your students to keep it positive. If they don't know something, let us know something you do know. Some recruiters are really patient, and they'll dig. They're like, well, do you have any experience in anything like that? Have you ever worked in a similar group experience? If they're patient, they will pull it out of you. Not all recruiters are like that. And when you're working with people who have 12 interviews in a day, by 4 o'clock, they may be tired, and they're not going to pull information out of you anymore. So you need to make sure that you are marketing yourself. And if there's something you don't know, think about something you do know. Remember your strengths. Remember what you've succeeded in, and let that come across. You want to be very positive and project yourself as a positive candidate. And ways you do that, again, is by clearly articulating answers. Remember what makes you successful, speaking up, making eye contact. All of that is projecting confidence, and that's what they're looking for. And we've been told that so every once in a while our students don't seem confident. And they should be. They're already impressed with you guys. So let that come across in the interview. You want to watch your body language. Again, sit up, project confidence. And finally, smile every once in a while. This is also part of how your personality would work in corporate culture. They realize that you're nervous. They realize that an interview is a very nerve-wracking situation. But every once in a while, you want to smile. And if they say a joke, and this is funny, I think people get really nervous, and they'll try to loosen it up by telling a joke, and you're like, should I laugh? Shouldn't I laugh? It's okay to laugh. These are people too. They could be your colleagues in the future. So smile, laugh. Let your personality come out. This is a dialogue. The interview is part of this process. So every once in a while, remember to smile. Don't look afraid or upset or too nervous. They know you're nervous, but try to smile. Even if it's that nervous smile, it helps. Some other tips. You want to ask detailed questions about the company, the position, and special projects that they've worked on. Some typical work assignments that they've worked on. What might I expect in the way of projects for the summer? Ask them for an internship example or something that an intern has done in the past. For the corporate culture, you might want to let them know that corporate culture is very important to you. Give me some insight into what you think about the corporate culture, or what's something that your company could give to me. So you want to ask them a little bit more about, hey, do you guys have, you don't want to get into the benefits package, that type of thing, but if you're working with a large company that has a campus, maybe a Microsoft or a Cisco, or maybe one of the El Segundo, aerospace companies, and you just want to have a better feel for how do these large companies work, you might want to ask them about, tell me a little bit more about the company culture. What makes you guys different from your competitors? What's a day in the life like for an employee at your company? So you're getting an idea of what you can expect if you're hired to work there. Growth potential is another area that's really good. What is the typical career path for someone who is accepted to the position that you're interviewing for? If it's an entry-level position, what are some of the next future goals or steps or growth patterns that people who were hired into your position have done? And they might go on to say, oh, they go on to be managers after 2 years, or maybe they enter a rotational leadership program. So it's good for you to see how you can grow within that company. Asking detailed questions about company position. Again, team structure and travel. You might want to mention some examples of what you've done in a position in the past, and how do their teams work? Do they work in teams? Is there a team leader? Are you expected to travel? These are some questions that you could ask. Any new technologies or products that they're working on? You're going to go to these companies' websites before you actually have an interview with them. So if there's a new project that you've heard they're working on, or maybe they just got a big government contract and you know that this is an area where they're growing, you might want to ask them a little bit more about that. Or ask them for their opinions on what they think of some of their new technologies or products, or other areas where they may grow as a company. Always ask the interviewer about their experiences. The person who's recruiting you is an employee from that company, so you might want to ask just for their personal opinions and how they've grown in the company and how do they like working on certain projects. They're people too. You're probably interviewing with an actual engineer for most of the time, so ask them about their questions. And finally, don't mention salary at the very end. It's one of those tips. I know you're kind of wondering, but it's too early to do that in a first interview, so you don't want to mention salary unless they directly ask you that question. That's not one of the questions you want to ask during a first interview. So if you have a salary range, though, be prepared. Some of the companies will ask you at the end of the first interview, do you have a salary range? What would be the minimum salary that you would like to work for the company? You should have something like that prepared just in case you're asked. And you can go to like engineersalary.com or some other websites to see what some salaries, expected salaries for people in your field with your experience. They usually, when it comes to perks, the question was, we have to repeat it for Dan. At what point do you actually start talking about benefits and salary, that type of thing? You're not going to talk about that in the first interview, but if it's after the second interview and they are ready to offer you a position, that's when you would be able to. So they will start that dialogue. They will breach the topic. And we actually have next week a workshop on evaluating and negotiating for a job offer. So it's something that they will bring up. It's an etiquette thing. It's not something that's going to go to the wayside. It's part of their HR process. So you shouldn't bring up the subject until maybe second or third interview. And even in the second interview, they'll bring up the subject. It's very rare where you'll have to be the one to start talking about salary and that type of thing. Etiquette-wise, you could always ask them, what are the next steps? And they're like, oh, we're interviewing more candidates, and then we'll be able to discuss a possible offer. You kind of have that answered for you, and then you could think, okay, after this step, then we're going to start talking about benefits and that type of thing. And that's part of the offer. So you wouldn't talk about benefits so soon. They always ask that question. It's not something you should worry about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's very important to them because they have budgets that they have to think about as well. So they'll ask the question.
They know what they can offer. They know what is reasonable. So even though you tell them the number is might be a little bit off, in their opinion, they will not hold you off or hold you down.
Very good. Thank you. For follow-up or things to do after the interview, inquire about the process. After you guys are finishing and you're shaking hands and you're about to leave the room, you might want to ask them, okay, so where are you guys in the interview process, and when do you think you might be able to hear from them or someone from their team? They might be recruiting across many campuses, and then after 2 months of travel, then they're going to start looking at offering positions. Or maybe they're going to offer a few USC students positions right after they do the interview. They'll get back to you next week. So ask them the questions instead of just wondering. Just let them know, where are you guys in the interview process, and when would I be able to hear from you in the future? You also do not want to forget to ask them for contact information so you can send them a thank you note. In our office, we cannot give you guys the recruiter's contact information. They need to opt in, or they need to give you their contact information. So while you're wrapping up the interview, you want to ask them for a business card or their name and email address so you could get back to them. Send them a thank you note. The thank you note, etiquette-wise, serves two purposes. One is just polite because they took the time to choose you and meet with you. Two, it serves as that second reminder of, hey, yeah, I met with you 2 days ago. I know you met with 15 students just like me, but I'm Candace, and here are my skills again in one quick sentence, and I look forward to hearing from you. Etiquette and a reminder of who you are. It has two purposes. So remember to ask for their contact information so you can send a thank you note. Personally, I like the thank you notes handwritten. It shows that extra effort. But if you have just an email address, or maybe they're on the road and they can only do email, send them an email thank you note. But definitely send them a thank you note. Thank them for the time. If you do not get the position, if you get the call or the email, if you already know why you might not have gotten the position, they might have told you verbally or they might have given you a letter. If you have the opportunity, you could always ask them how you could possibly improve in the future. And some students have asked, I haven't gotten the position. I don't know why. I don't understand. It's okay to ask them, is there any way that I can improve in the future? Thank you so much for the opportunity. I just want to make sure that I'm better prepared for future interviews. If you want to know that, you don't have to do this step, but every once in a while a student would like to know, what could I have done to improve, or what did I do wrong? It's not necessarily something you've done wrong. You could just, maybe it's a fit. Maybe you're just not a fit for the way that company works. Maybe you're very team-driven and they're not. Or maybe they have a new product that isn't really in line with your skill set. It's not personal. It's also about fit, and you just might not have been a fit for the company. So you might want to ask them, if you really want to know, you can always ask them if there's any tips that they may have so you can improve in the future. That way it's coming from a very positive place instead of something that's accusatory. Any other questions? Yes?
What if you interview on the same day with 5 to 10 people? Do you send thank you notes to everyone?
Yes. If you interview with 3 people in a rotational interview and that one person was touched by that note, and when they meet again about, okay, who are we hiring? If one of those people speaks up and says, you know what, Christine she sent that thank you note, and not that, that's the one thing that will get you the job, but it's that extra effort, And it just shows an attention to detail that not a lot of students have. They expect it from the business students because they're taught that in all business communication classes. You follow up every interaction, whether it's networking, an interview, anything like that, with a thank you note, because it's that whole networking connection. They don't expect that from the engineering students, and they are very impressed when you guys do it. So as much as you can bring that business savvy with the fact that you're highly technical, very smart, and all the other skill set that you have, it just makes your whole package even that more attractive. So anything that you can add to your package when it comes to meeting with or getting a position is great.
Once I went to an on-site interview and I met with like, I think it was 8 to 9 people.
That's
Wow,
unique.
Writing thank you notes.
And sometimes it's the same. I mean, we've been in those type of situations with panels or that type of thing. You're going to pretty much write the same thank you note to all the people, which is okay. The fact that you're thanking them, the fact that you're thanking them is the most important. And it could be that little thing that gives you the edge over someone who had the same exact skill set from USC. Another question? Yeah.
If you go on an interview but you never hear back from the company, how can you follow it up?
Well, one way, you definitely should follow up 2 weeks afterwards if you were told you would hear back next week. But that's why that last question is very important. Where are you in the process, and when might I be able to hear something? Because someone could be going through a recruiting cycle for 2 or 3 months, and they're just traveling campuses, and then afterwards they're offering positions. So you don't want to say 2 weeks later, where are you in the process? And they're like, we told you we're not going to do offers until December. You don't want to frustrate the hiring managers. But by asking that question, you should hopefully get a detail. And if they say we're going to get back to you next week, and next week you don't hear anything, the following week you can send them an email and just say, hey, I'm just following up. Just was curious as to where you guys were in the hiring process. I was really interested in the position and just wanted to know if there's anything further that you needed from me. That way, again, it's very positive. It's not like, hey, you didn't email me. But, you know, it's just how you frame it. Any other questions? Yes?
What's the etiquette in terms of when they offer you a job, whether it's after a certain interview, if they call you or email you?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're talking to them on the phone. Is it alright to say, let me get back?
You know what? As soon as you get it in writing, writing is very important. You'll get verbal offers. I never take an offer seriously for anything until you have it in writing. I mean, a verbal offer is understood, but they will send you something, whether it's a PDF or they'll send you something in the mail. It's okay for you to say, when do you guys need to hear a response from me? They know you guys are interviewing with multiple companies, and maybe you're waiting to hear back from your dream company. You wouldn't tell them that, but let them know, when would you guys need to have a decision, from me? And they usually give you a week or two. Some companies give you around a month to kind of sit on the offer and see if you're happy with the package. So just ask them when they'll need it by. It would be rare for a company to say, we need to know right now. That's not very. You might want to, even if they say we need to know right now, you can say, can I have actually 2 weeks to kind of think about this? Usually they'll say yes without a problem.
I would be suspect.
If they said right now, sign here, yeah, I would be, phew.
They want you to be happy with the offer and have time to make sure you're 100% committed,
Mm-hmm.
fit for you, and they know you need time to kind of go through that process.
Right.
Is it generally good advice to tell every company that their company is your top choice?
It's a personal thing.
Yeah, it's an ethics question. Yeah, some people are like, you are my number one and my number one only. If that's not the case, then just don't say anything.
What if they ask you?
I wouldn't tell them that they're your second company.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, you should tell them, you could let them know I'm interviewing with a number of companies and you guys are definitely one of my top contenders. That's fine. Keep your options open. And if a student told me that, and all of the recruiters that we work with, they would appreciate that answer. It also helps you when you start negotiating. So, and that we'll go into that next week. But that will help you when you're negotiating. If they know that they're one of 3, they might step up their package a little bit more. If they realize, you're just not married to that company, that there are 3 others that you've been talking to. So, figures could change, benefits could change, tuition remission, other benefits like that.
And how about when they ask you what are your weaknesses? Obviously, you don't say I don't have any weaknesses. Do you think you actually argue a weakness and then you turn it into sort of like a positive?
Definitely. Like some of the weaknesses where, I find myself, and again, it's always that positive weakness. A weakness, that's a strength. And you could think about some of those with some examples would be committing to a lot of activities and learning how to do some time management. So you find some time for yourself because you focus so much on student organizations and all of your, time commitments with class that you want to make sure that you take some time out for yourself. Here you're showing you're dedicated, you have priorities, and that you make yourself the last priority, and that's something that you want to change. That's a strength. It's a weakness, but it's definitely very strong because you're showing how committed you are to your commitments, how responsible you are. So think about a real weakness that you have and how that could be kind of changed into a strength. You don't want to say, I hate waking up in the morning, or, something that could be like, oh, okay, there's nothing positive about that. Like and there are some answers that might seem contrived to you, but it's all in how you frame it. It's all in how you position it to the company. So do you have a weakness that you want to share and how we could switch it?
No, I'm just. Well,
You're like, I have no weaknesses.
Just, the approach is what to say, because, I've heard that.
Yeah, definitely. Turn it into a strength if you
Time
can.
management.
Yeah.
That's a big one. I like that answer. I've heard students use time management because you're in school, you're doing internships, you're doing work, and through the course of 4 years, you notice that you needed to work on your time management skills, and this is what you did to improve your time management. So you end it with the way you improved something that was a weakness, so you bring it out at the end as a strength that you've done to change your weakness. So I left feeling like, okay, he's got great time management skills,
And
or handles stress really well.
there's a lot. I mean, one that's actually a weakness that a student spoke to me about that I thought was great. And again, it's showing how you overcame that weakness is being shy in situations and not feeling confident enough to talk to a professor when they were maybe doing poorly in a class. What did they do? How did you fix that? Well, I noticed that I do need to speak up if I have a question early on because it will snowball into a bad situation. So now when I have a problem, I meet with the professor immediately in their office hours so I could, tackle the situation early on before it becomes something big. That could have been something you learned your freshman year when you're just trying to get through college and you're like, I should ask the professor when I have questions. That was a weakness that you had that you learned from. So it doesn't necessarily need to change into a strength, but it could be something that you learned from in the long run. Any other questions?
So you said these are available online?
Yes, this one should be available next week.
Where you go to that website?
I'll show you exactly where you go.
And how about the slides from this and then the other?
Yeah, they're all on the same site. So let me show you where that is.
The only one that's not up will be the negotiation and international student.
Yeah, the ones that we have not. And they all actually were posted today, so you should see them midnight tonight. They will be live. So if you go to the Viterbi Careers website, which is viterbi.usc.edu/careers, and if you go to students, let me maximize the glare. Students, and workshops is the very first section. And you will see all the way down at the bottom, and you're not going to see them all right now, but midnight tonight, you'll see the links to the video and the PowerPoint for all of our workshops. This is actually the workshop schedule of what's still coming up. Okay? All right. Thank you for coming.